The restaurant exuded a comforting warmth, its inviting atmosphere accentuated by the soft strains of light jazz. Dim lighting cloaked the space, offering a sense of intimacy that seemed perfect for quiet secrets. Angela had chosen a seat by the window, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her wine glass. Across the table sat Jason, her new friend, or perhaps something more. His relaxed confidence and easy grin sent her heart racing in a way she hadn't felt in years. Tonight, Jason had picked a secluded spot in the city, a tucked-away gem where the chances of being recognized were slim. The idea had seemed safe, almost exciting. Angela had spent extra time on her appearance, meticulously applying her makeup and double-checking every detail in the mirror before stepping out. She wanted to look flawless, knowing the power of a first impression. When Jason excused himself to visit the restroom, Angela instinctively reached for her compact. She smoothed a stray strand of hair and lightly dabbed her lips, ensuring her lipstick was untouched. Minutes ticked by, and her thoughts began to wander. Why was he taking so long? At first, she brushed it off as paranoia, but an uneasy chill crept up her spine, one she couldn't ignore. Her phone vibrated softly on the table, pulling her out of her thoughts. Angela glanced at the screen, her breath catching. It was Mason, her husband. He wasn't supposed to be calling her now, not while he was at work. Clearing her throat, she answered, forcing a cheerful tone. "Yes, honey." Mason's voice came through calm, but laced with something she couldn't quite place. "Where are you right now?" A bead of sweat formed on her temple as she let out a quick, nervous laugh. "Oh, I'm on a date. Just kidding," she said lightly, trying to sound playful. "I'm catching up with some old friends from the conservatory, that's all." There was a brief, weighted pause before Mason spoke again. "Unfortunately, it's not a joke. Turn around." The words hit her like ice. Angela froze, her heart hammering as she slowly turned her head. In the corner of the restaurant, partially obscured by the dim lighting, sat Mason. He gave her a slow, deliberate wave, his expression unreadable. Her throat went dry, and she gripped her phone tighter. "Mason, what are you doing here? I thought you were at work." His voice remained calm, almost casual. "Change of plans? I decided to grab a bite to eat. Imagine my surprise when I saw my wife looking cozy with some guy." The steady tone of his words hit her harder than any shout could have. Angela's pulse raced as she fumbled for an excuse. "Wait, what? You've got it all wrong? You think this is a date?" She quickly shifted gears. "What about you? You're sitting with some pretty woman over there." Mason let out a quiet chuckle. "That's Zoe, Angela, my lawyer." Angela's stomach dropped. Her mind scrambled for something, anything, to regain control. Straightening her posture, she took a breath, smoothed her dress, and approached their table with deliberate steps, her heels clicking softly on the floor. She summoned a polite smile and nodded at Zoe as she sat down. "Well, hello," she greeted, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Zoe, right?" Zoe returned the nod, her composure unwavering, though her gaze remained sharp. Turning her attention to Mason, Angela kept her voice sweet but edged with curiosity. "Honey, I have to ask, why are you here with a lawyer? Is there something going on that I should know about?" Mason leaned back in his chair, the faintest hint of a smirk on his face. "You could say that," he said, his tone measured. "It's an unpleasant situation, really. Kind of embarrassing." He glanced between Angela and Zoe, shaking his head slowly. "Never thought I'd find myself here, sitting with my lawyer, but here I am." The restaurant's warmth was deceptive, its cozy atmosphere cloaked in the soft rhythms of jazz. Angela felt her cheeks flush as Mason, her husband, looked at her with an unnerving calm. "You know," he began, his voice steady, though his gaze hardened, "I just hope I'm not getting fitted for reindeer antlers this Christmas." Her heart raced, but she forced a light laugh and kept her tone casual. "That sounds dreadful, honey," Angela replied smoothly, turning toward Zoe, her husband's lawyer, with a practiced smile. "What do you think, Zoe? Imagine a husband claiming he works the night shift, only to secretly follow his wife. Isn't that a bit paranoid?" Zoe's lips curled into a polite smile, her gaze giving nothing away. "Life does have a way of surprising us," she replied coolly. "That's why I'm here, to guide couples through moments like these." Angela chuckled, though her mind raced. "A divorce lawyer, huh? Well, Mason, let's not jump to conclusions," she said breezily. "This is just dinner with an old friend, nothing more." Mason took a slow sip from his glass, his steady gaze never leaving hers. Setting the glass down, he leaned forward slightly, his expression calm yet pointed. "Kathy," he began, his tone deliberate. "You know I don't make impulsive decisions. I prefer to keep a clear head. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about Jason? Is he just a friend? Or is there more to the story?" Angela didn't flinch, her smile unwavering. "Mason, I've already told you. Jason is a friend from the conservatory, a brilliant pianist. We're just catching up, talking about music." She gave a small shrug, keeping her voice light. "You know how expressive creative types can be. That's all this is." Mason raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a faint, almost amused smile. "I see. Well, I suppose I should hope his hands stay on the piano keys," he said dryly. Angela waved a dismissive hand, her laugh ringing out. "Zoe, you should take note. Your client here loves to provoke. Honestly, Mason, such innuendo is bold, even for you." Zoe shrugged, her expression neutral as she observed the exchange. Mason's tone grew serious, though a faint smile lingered. "So, Kathy," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "you're telling us there's absolutely nothing between you and Jason? No intimacy whatsoever?" Angela's gaze darted between Mason and Zoe before she answered, her voice light with a playful edge. "Mason, we're just friends, pure and simple. Unless Zoe here considers a love of music grounds for filing an infidelity suit," she joked, glancing at Zoe. Zoe chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I wouldn't go that far, Angela," she replied with a measured smile. "I think we can handle this without unnecessary drama." Mason smirked, clearly entertained by the scene unfolding before him. "All right, honey," he said, leaning back in his chair, "but I'd love to hear what Jason thinks about your friendship. It would be enlightening to get his take." Angela held her chin high, her voice steady as she replied, "Of course, Mason. Once Jason's back, he'll tell you exactly the same thing. Not sure why he's taking so long, though." She forced a smile, even as her grip on the wineglass tightened. Mason casually pulled out his phone, tapping the screen as he spoke. "Actually, Angela, we don't need Jason here. He might show up eventually, but for now, I thought you'd prefer to hear what I've learned." He raised the phone slightly, his expression unreadable. Angela's breath hitched as Mason pressed play on the recording. His voice came through first. "Hey, man, is that redhead over there your friend?" Jason's voice followed, light-hearted and too comfortable. "You could say that," he replied. "But why do you ask?" Mason kept his tone playful. "I've always admired how some guys make it look so easy to pick up women. Maybe you could give me some tips." Jason's laugh was low and smug. "Oh, it's not something you can teach. Some of us are just naturals, you know?" Mason's voice remained casual, though with an edge. "I've heard redheads are the wildest in bed. Is that true? You get anywhere with her?" Jason didn't hesitate. He chuckled, proud and almost boasting. "Oh, they're lively, all right. That one? She's definitely got spirit. Let's just say she's full of energy." There was a pause before Mason responded lightly. "Wow, lucky you." Jason laughed again, his tone filled with satisfaction. "Lucky is one word for it. Just hoping she doesn't wear me out tonight, if you know what I mean." The recording ended, leaving the room heavy with silence. Angela's heart raced, her mind scrambling for a way to recover. Zoe sat quietly, her face unreadable, while Mason leaned back in his chair, his calm smile unchanged, watching and waiting for her next move. "I thanked Jason for the conversation and wished him luck," he remarked casually, "and to make things more interesting, I made sure he'd have a little extra time to think about our chat. I propped the restroom door handle so he couldn't get out right away." The recording stopped, leaving the restaurant's soft jazz to fill the tense silence at the table. Angela's cheeks flushed, her grip tightening on her glass. Despite her racing thoughts, she cleared her throat, straightened her posture, and forced a shaky smile. Across from her, Zoe's sharp gaze took in every nuance of the situation, while Mason's expression remained amused, as if he were waiting for the next act in a play. "Well, Mason," Angela began, her voice strained but attempting calm, "I think Jason was just showing off. You know how men can be, saying outrageous things when they're trying to bond. It's all just talk, really." Mason raised an eyebrow, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Oh, just talk. Funny how detailed those jokes sounded. But go on, Angela, I'm all ears. Explain it away." Angela let out a nervous laugh, her voice trembling slightly. "Mason, really," she said, forcing a shrug. "Jason's just a braggart. He's got a wild imagination and loves to exaggerate. Honestly, the guy probably thought he was being funny. Nothing he said means anything. She turned to Zoe, searching for an ally. Zoe, surely you see how ridiculous it is to take the word of someone who talks like an idiot. People say all kinds of things. Zoe's expression remained composed, though her tight-lipped smile carried an edge of amusement. I think I've seen enough for one evening, she said, gathering her belongings. This isn't the kind of event I usually attend, but I have to thank Mason for inviting me. It's been enlightening. Angela's face tensed, but before she could respond, movement caught her eye. Jason had finally emerged, scanning the restaurant with a flustered expression. Mason's polite smile returned. Looks like your friend is back, Angela. He seems eager to find you. Angela called out to Jason, who hurried over, visibly frustrated. He didn't even notice Mason or Zoe at the table. Angela, you won't believe this, he exclaimed, his voice heated. Some jerk jammed the restroom door. I was stuck in there forever. His eyes darted to Mason, narrowing with suspicion. It was you, wasn't it? Are you insane? Mason raised an eyebrow, his smile unwavering. Angela shot Jason a pleading look, cutting in quickly. Jason, let me introduce you. This is Mason, my husband. Why don't you explain to him that you're just... She never finished the sentence. Jason's face turned pale as realization dawned. His wide eyes betrayed sheer panic, and he stammered, crap. He glanced around, clearly searching for an escape. I think my phone's ringing. Better go check on that. With a clumsy nod, Jason bolted back to his table, grabbed his things, and dashed out of the restaurant without so much as a backward glance. Angela stared after him, her face a blend of shock and anger. Mason chuckled softly, shaking his head. Well, Angela, he said with mock sympathy, Jason might be decent in bed, but he's a terrible friend. Seems he's not willing to stand by you when things get messy. He glanced at Zoe, who gave a small nod, then back at Angela. Anyway, I think it's time to settle up and call it a night, don't you? Zoe rose from her chair, adjusting her bag. Agreed, she said smoothly. Thanks for an interesting evening. Mason turned back to Angela with a half smile. Oh, and honey, you'll be covering dinner with Jason out of your own pocket. Angela's jaw clenched, but she forced herself to nod. Calling the waiter over, she handed him her card, trying to maintain composure. Moments later, the waiter returned, frowning. Sorry, ma'am, he said apologetically, but your card isn't working. As panic flickered across Angela's face, Mason and Zoe passed by on their way out. Angela called after him, her voice tight with frustration. Mason, my card isn't working. Did you do this? Are you really leaving me like this? Mason shrugged, turning back with a feigned look of sympathy. I didn't think it would be a problem, Mason answered, his voice calm but tinged with mockery. I figured your friend could handle it. Damn it, Mason, Angela hissed, her tone low but shaking with restrained fury. You're seriously going to leave me there without money? No way to pay the bill? Mason's smile widened, his expression infuriatingly composed. Come on, Angela, you're resourceful. You'll figure something out. With that, he turned on his heel, Zoe walking beside him. As they exited the restaurant, Zoe gave Angela a pointed glance. I'll have the papers ready by tomorrow morning, Zoe said quietly. Thanks, Mason replied, nodding, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. For now, at least, the evening was behind him. At home, Mason moved slowly through the house, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Tossing a few essentials into a suitcase, he resisted the urge to pack everything at once. It could wait until tomorrow. A few nights at his brother's place seemed like the escape he needed after the ordeal. Barely an hour had passed when the front door swung open. Angela stormed in, her face flushed with anger, and her purse hit the table with a loud thud. Mason, what the hell was that? She demanded, marching toward him. You just had to put on some cheap spectacle, dragging your lawyer along and setting me up like that? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Her voice rose as she flung her hands into the air. And then you left me there with no way to pay. They were threatening to make me wash dishes, or worse, clean toilets. Thank God Angie showed up to bail me out. Mason let out a sharp laugh, more from stress than humor, but it struck Angela like a slap. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. What's so funny? Raising a hand in an attempt to calm her, Mason's tone shifted, though it carried a dangerous edge. Angela, he began, deliberately slow, What instrument do you play? She blinked, her anger momentarily replaced with confusion. What? What does that have to do with anything? You know I play the flute? Mason's smile twisted into something bitter. Then maybe you should go find your lover and continue your little duet, he said with a mock bow, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Might suit you better. Now leave me alone. Angela's face reddened, her fists clenching tightly at her sides. Mason, damn you! She spat. Are you serious? You humiliated me, dragged that woman, your lawyer, into this, and now you're throwing cheap insults? Do you want a divorce? You're ready to throw everything away because of something stupid Jason said? You're so petty. Mason felt the words sting but didn't flinch. His voice dropped to a softer, almost sorrowful tone. Angela, I did love you once. Maybe you even loved me too. We were good together once, but now, it's clear this doesn't mean anything to you anymore. He shook his head. So yeah, I want a divorce, because my wife apparently prefers riding piano players. The words landed like a slap, and Angela's face twisted in fury. Without hesitation, she grabbed her purse and hurled it across the room at him. Go to hell, Mason! Stop insulting me! I don't deserve this! Her voice cracked under the weight of her rage. Mason's patience snapped. He slung his sports bag over his shoulder and turned toward the door. With a curt, polite bow, he said nothing more and walked out of the house, leaving Angela standing there, seething. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Angela opened it to find Zoe standing on the porch, holding a thick stack of papers. Zoe didn't say a word, simply holding them out. Angela's expression hardened as she snatched the documents, her jaw tightening. Without a single glance back, Zoe turned and walked away, leaving Angela standing in the doorway, gripping the papers that would finalize the end of her marriage. Zoe's calm, composed demeanor lingered in Angela's mind long after she had left. It only fueled Angela's determination. She wasn't the type to lose, not in any situation. She prided herself on her wit and cleverness, confident she could navigate whatever challenges Mason threw her way. By the afternoon, Angela had already hired a highly regarded lawyer and begun strategizing her case. Her plan was straightforward: paint Mason as a jealous, overreacting husband. After all, she thought, he had only seen her sharing dinner with Jason, a friend and fellow musician. Surely Mason's jealousy had clouded his judgment, pushing him to overreach. But as Angela replayed the events, a troubling question crept into her mind. How had Mason known about her meeting with Jason? She had been so careful, hadn't she? Angela combed through her memories, searching for any slip-up, but nothing surfaced. Shaking off the unease, she reassured herself that she could handle the situation. The courtroom would be her stage, and she was confident she could win the audience. When the trial day arrived, Angela sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, exuding calm and confidence. Their argument was polished, their strategy airtight. The plan was simple: portray Mason as paranoid and overbearing. But as the trial unfolded, cracks began to form in her confidence. Mason's lawyer stepped forward, holding something Angela hadn't anticipated: hard evidence. He presented printed screenshots of messages from Angela's phone, messages that went far beyond innocent conversation with Jason. Her face burned with embarrassment as she muttered under her breath, "Damn it, Mason. You went through my phone. That's a complete violation of privacy." The hits didn't stop there. Mason had another ace up his sleeve: a witness. He called their retired neighbor to the stand, a man who lived across the street. The neighbor testified that he had seen Jason arriving at Angela and Mason's house late one evening while Mason was working the night shift. Angela's lawyer tried to discredit the witness, but the damage was done. The combination of the messages and the testimony left her defense in tatters. By the end of the proceedings, the verdict was clear. Mason had won. After the trial, Angela caught up to him in the courthouse hallway. She stepped in front of him, her voice soft and pleading, a sharp contrast to the past few weeks. "Mason, please," she began. "Can we talk? Maybe we don't have to end things like this. I made mistakes, but we had something special. Isn't there any way we can try again?" Mason's expression was cold, his eyes unwavering. "Please, Angela," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You didn't just make mistakes. You lied. Even now, you're trying to twist things to suit yourself." He shook his head slowly. "I loved you, but betrayal is something I can't forgive." Angela's face fell as she watched him turn and walk away. his words cutting deeper than she expected. The game she thought she had under control had backfired spectacularly, leaving her to face the full weight of her actions. 3 months later, the finality of Angela's situation began to sink in. The divorce had been swift and merciless, a painful reminder of how drastically her life had unraveled. Mason had been resolute, and Angela was now left to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. Initially, she tried to maintain a facade of composure, convincing herself that she could rebuild. But her savings dwindled quickly, and the mounting bills crushed her optimism. The scandal had cost her more than her marriage. It had cost her livelihood. She lost her job at the music school, with the director citing unprofessional behavior in the aftermath of the trial. Without steady income, the walls of her once comforting home began closing in. Missed mortgage payments piled up until an eviction notice arrived, shattering any remaining hope. Angela stood in her living room, surrounded by boxes filled with memories of a life that no longer felt like hers. Friends she had once leaned on grew distant. Some whispered behind closed doors about her fall from grace, while others avoided her entirely, unsure of how to handle the awkwardness. Desperate and alone, Angela sought refuge with a distant relative who reluctantly took her in. The cramped living space amplified her sense of shame and isolation. Nights were the hardest. Lying awake in a tiny room, she was haunted by regret. Her thoughts often drifted to the life she had shared with Mason, the security, the love, and the trust she had taken for granted. She had convinced herself that her betrayal could be smoothed over, but now she realized the cost was far greater than she ever imagined. Her darkest moments came with the crushing realization that she had lost more than just a home or a job. She had lost herself. The betrayal that she thought would remain hidden had stripped away her identity, leaving her to confront a bleak and uncertain future, burdened by the echoes of her past.